Folks, before we dive in, I want to say this one's a bit longer than usual, but St. Charles deserves every second of it. See that sign there? Welcome to St. Charles, Virginia. Established in 1908 by getting their very own post office, and in 1914, St. Charles became an official town. Now, I don't know about you, but when I pass a sign like that, I figure I'm coming into a place that still knows its own name and who it belongs to. Now here's Main Street, the heartbeat of town. You could start at one end for a haircut, grab lunch in the middle, and catch a show at the other before the day was done. Folks didn't just shop here, they visited. They swapped stories, traded eggs for flour, and caught up on news quicker than any newspaper could print it. Every store had its own smell, its own sound, and every floorboard remembered the footsteps that crossed it. Look at that. You can tell it's a Saturday. Cars parked every which way, people all over the sidewalk, and the smell of fresh bread drifting from the bakery. Men leaned on fenders talking mine work, while women ducked in and out of the shops. And you can bet somewhere in that crowd, kids were weaving between legs, like the street was their playground. Do you see those strings of lights? Well, when the sun went down, that's when Main Street came alive. A bus rolled in from Pennington Gap every weekend, dropping off folks eager to join the fun. Windows glowed warm, music spilled from the cafe, and the air smelled like fresh popcorn drifting from the theater. Young couples strolled slow, hand in hand, and the old-timers lingered because they just weren't ready for the night to end. Just a short walk from Main Street stood the St. Charles Depot, the town's lifeline to the outside world. From here, black coal rolled out by the trainload, headed for markets far beyond these mountains, while passenger cars brought in miners' families, traveling salesmen, and the occasional curious visitor. Step inside and the air carried the scent of paper, ink, and the faint must of travel-worn luggage. Wooden benches lined the walls where passengers sat clutching parcels and dreams. At the ticket window, a family chatted with the station agent, the little girl holding tight to her teddy bear, eager for the adventure ahead. Now here's a sight. 3 boys with bikes, not just any bikes either. These were the very first bicycles in St. Charles. Can you imagine the stir that caused? Every kid in town probably followed them around like they were leading a parade. Back then, a bike was pure freedom. No rush, no schedules. Just the wind in your face and your best friends riding right alongside you. If you were lucky, you got home tired, dirty, and happy. Do you see that building there? That's the St. Charles Theater, and on a Friday night it was the brightest spot in town. The marquee lights would flicker on just as the sun dipped behind the ridge, casting a warm glow clear across Main Street. Folks lined up outside, tickets in hand, talking about the week, swapping stories, kids darting between legs. Now, before you ever made it to your seat, you had to stop right here at the concession stand. Oh, that smell. Buttery popcorn drifting out to the street, candy jars lined up just so. You'd dig in your pocket for change, maybe splurge on a cola if you'd saved a little extra. The gal behind the counter knew everybody by name and would slip the kids an extra scoop of popcorn just because. Step inside and take in the sight. Rows of red seats, the smell of popcorn and candy lingering in the air, the hum of the projector warming up. The lights dimmed slowly, voices hushed, and then came that first flicker on the screen. For the next couple of hours, St. Charles faded away, replaced by cowboys on the range, heroes on grand adventures, or Dorothy walking the yellow brick road. And when the lights came back up, You could see it in every smile. It had been worth every penny and then some. Here's the hardware store, part supply stop, part town square. You'd walk in for nails, oil, or maybe a lantern, and end up leaning on the counter, swapping stories about ball games, mine work, or who was getting married next. Now take a good look at this. The only radio in all of St. Charles sitting right there in the hardware store. Folks from every corner of town and even out from Bonnie Blue would come in, find themselves a spot, and lean in close just to catch the broadcast. News from the wider world, the Grand Ole Opry, maybe even a ball game or two crackling through the speaker. It wasn't just listening, it was the whole community. Now this here was a weekend thrill in Bonnie Blue, riding the man car up to the top of the mountain. It wasn't built for sightseeing, but on Saturdays and Sundays, it became just that. Folks would pile in, holding on as the car clanked and rattled its way up the rails. And when you reached the top, the breeze hit your face, and you could see clear across the valley, a view worth every bump and jolt on the way up. From up here, you can read a town like a map, where folks worked, where they prayed, where kids wore a path between the schoolyard and home. Summertime meant finding your way to cool water, and the favorite spot for folks from Bonnie Blue was down at the dam on the North Fork of the Powell River. The place was called The Pocket, about 6 miles away and worth every step of the hot walk. You'd find kids laughing and splashing from morning till evening, then heading home with sunburned shoulders and tired smiles. A little farther along the river was a hidden spot, Cold Spring, tucked behind a giant rock where the road couldn't see. That one had a bit of mischief to it. Perfect for those who didn't mind skipping their swimsuits, every coal town had its heart. And for those that worked for the Blue Diamond Coal Company, that heart was the company store. It was more than just a place to buy flour, coffee, or bolts of cloth. It was where you caught up on the latest news, where kids pressed their noses to the glass candy jars, and where a miner's tab kept the family fed until payday. As one local put it, it was the one place you could find anything you truly needed, and maybe a few things you didn't, but just couldn't pass up. The company store wasn't just part of life in Bonnie Blue. It was stitched into the very fabric of it. Right here's where the mountain's black gold made its way to the world. Lone Mountain Processing. Coal cars lined up, the tipple standing tall against the ridge, and a steady hum of work that never really stopped. Men walked these paths with lunch buckets swinging, boots coated in dust, and shoulders carrying the weight of the day. That sign out front wasn't just a marker, it was a statement. Folks around here knew that as long as Lone Mountain was running, St. Charles would keep on breathing. Here's an image of a coal miner by the name of Bill Kaylor. His son Jim shared a touching post in the St. Charles Facebook group. My father died of a heart attack 51 years ago today. Born in Wise, Virginia, he was orphaned by age 7. Him and brother Sylvan were raised by Uncle and Aunt Jim and Ella Stapleton of Bonnie Blue. Quit school age 13 and went to work in the mines shortly after. Served in U.S. Army and fought in the European theater in World War II, then back to the Bonnie Blue mines till 1952. He moved his family to Indiana for work in the auto industry, like so many did from Lee County and all over the South. He loved God, country, and family. Still miss 'em every day. And here's Mr. and Mrs. Greer, side by side like they'd always been. Him in his guard uniform, steady and sure, and her in that well-worn apron that had seen 1,000 meals. 100 stories, and more love than most folks get in a lifetime. He worked as a security guard for Benedict Cole, his uniform pressed and his cap set just right, a quiet symbol of responsibility and pride in his work. Let me tell you about the heart of learning in St. Charles, the high school. Back when those brick halls rang with the voices of teenagers in leather jackets, talking about the future, lockers slamming, and Friday night games in the gym bringing the whole town together. School pride wasn't just about books. It was about teams, trophies, and that friendly spirit. And the St. Charles Midgets basketball team gave the town plenty to cheer about. In that gym, every dribble echoed like a drum, and when that ball sank through the net, you'd think the roof might lift clean off with all the hollering. In the evenings, the same space transformed for school dances, but prom night, that was magic. Corsages, press suits, and the music floating into the warm night air. Folks still remember seeing James Ball and his prom date, Janice Rydens, walk in together in 1973. The very picture of young love in a small, cold town. Not every lesson came from a desk. At Bonnie Blue, kids ate sandwiches under the open sky, swapping cookies for apples without a thought. The swings creaked, laughter carried across the yard, and for a while, grades and homework didn't matter. Just sunshine, friendship, and a peanut butter sandwich with your best buddy. In the classroom, art time meant more than paper and glue. Kids leaned over their desks, trading colors, swapping ideas, and laughing as they worked. Every project told its own little story, and every story was worth sharing. Later, when the high school merged with Pennington Gap's high school, the elementary school took over that building after theirs burned down. Out front, little ones played tag at recess, their laughter carrying down the street, while inside those same rooms and that same gym became a second home for a new generation. That old building still stands today as St. Charles Elementary School, its halls still echoing with the laughter of children while quietly holding the memories of both its high school and elementary school days. Now for the pride of the Coal Camp Diamond, the St. Charles Mountaineers. This wasn't just a baseball team, it was a summer ritual. The crack of the bat echoed across the hills, and families lined the sidelines with picnic baskets, cheering every run. Men who'd spent the week underground came alive on that field, uniforms dusty, gloves worn, but spirits high. Onlookers swapped stories, kids chased foul balls, and the smell of hot dogs hung in the warm air. The Mountaineers didn't just play ball, they gave the whole town a reason to come together. And whether you rooted for them or the Miners team or both, well, that depends on who you ask. Meet Jess Bradley and Les Pennington, three brothers who could carry a tune as easy as they carried a day's work. Their music wasn't just sound, it was kinfolk harmony, stitched together by blood, sweat, and a whole lot of heart. And then came the Lee County Ridge Runners, neighbors and friends gathered with guitars, fiddles, and a banjo or two. They didn't need a stage, just a patch of grass and a willing crowd. Before long, toes were tapping and hearts were lighter, the music rolling as naturally as the hills around them. Among the familiar faces of St. Charles was Irvin Fritz, who spent much of his life underground as a coal miner before stepping into public service. He first served as a deputy, later becoming the town's police chief, a steady presence who kept order with fairness and respect. Folks remember him not just for the badge he wore, but for the trust he carried in the community. By his side was his wife, Miss Maxine, remembered for her love of black cats and her ever-growing collection of salt and pepper shakers. She brought her own kind of charm to town life, always ready with a smile, a conversation, or a helping hand. Together, Irvin and Maxine showed that leadership in a small town wasn't only about law and order. It was about kindness, connection, and weaving themselves into the everyday fabric of St. Charles. Every town's got its legends, and here one of them had 4 legs. His name was Crip, the only dog in town that paid taxes, thanks to the townsfolk. Run over by a train, but too stubborn to die, Crip limped his way into everyone's hearts. A shoemaker made him a fine collar, and he took up his post under a bench in front of Gilliam's, ready to sound the alarm if trouble came. They say dogs love good men, and if that's true, St. Charles must have been full of them. This here's C.J. Poe's General Merchandise, the kind of place where you could walk in for feed, flour, and maybe a story or two. Shelves stacked with everything from canned goods to overalls, and a counter that had heard more local gossip than any newspaper could print. And for the kids, Poe's was magic. Many remember saving up Blue Horse notebook labels and trading them in for candy or small prizes, a sweet reward that made every school day feel like it had a little adventure waiting at the end. If you stayed long enough, you might even leave with more than you planned, both in supplies and in good conversation. See that signpost there? St. Charles might be just one name among many on that sign, but for folks who know, every town name on that sign carries a story worth telling. Coming down that road, you can feel it in your bones. You're headed toward a place where the hills hold tight to their people, and the people hold tight to each other. That's not just directions, that's an invitation. Just a mile from St. Charles in Maness, Ely's store was the spot for bologna sliced your way, cold glass bottled drinks for a nickel, and penny candy that could keep a child guessing for 10 minutes. Later, Elmer Hale lived in the very building itself, keeping his barber chair on one end. Around St. Charles, folks just called him Junior. The man always ready with a wave when you drove by. Haircuts were $2, but what folks still chuckle about today are the stories of his home brew. Let's just say more than a few legends went around about it being the best you could find anywhere in Lee County. It wasn't just a store, it was the center of community life. Kids played out front, fireworks popped in the summer, and neighbors swapped news at the counter. Even today, the old building still stands by the railroad track, a weathered reminder of how small-town connections were made. Over the years, many of St. Charles's once bustling businesses have packed up and gone, their storefronts now quiet as an early Sunday morning. Some buildings have vanished entirely, leaving only a bare patch of earth where memories once stood proud. But a few, weathered and worn, have stood their ground. In 2022, the state struck the charter from the books. But a town ain't just ink on paper. It's the folks who keep showing up, swapping news and unlocking doors. In a town shaped by coal mining, the Stone Mountain Black Lung Clinic wasn't just an organization. It was, and still is, a lifeline. The clinic continues to provide vital care, resources, and advocacy for miners and their families, making sure their struggles are not forgotten. Here, the battles fought in the mines didn't end at the shift whistle. They were carried into meetings, medical care, and efforts to win justice for those who gave their health to the coal seams. Generations have walked through its doors, finding not only treatment, but understanding and a sense of dignity. The St. Charles Community Center was more than four walls. It was a safety net. Families in need of food, clothing, or a warm coat for the winter could find them here. Volunteers gave their time to make sure no neighbor went without. While its purpose was rooted in meeting practical needs, it also became a quiet place for encouragement, conversation, and hope, proving that even in the hardest seasons, the town could take care of its own. Faith's been the steady hand on the shoulder of St. Charles for as long as folks can remember, and 3 Baptist churches still keep that lamp burning bright. Darbyville Baptist opens its door for Sunday morning services, and over at Beacon Light Baptist, its doors swing open on Sunday mornings and Wednesday evening for prayer service, singing the hymns you've known since childhood, and handshakes that turn into hugs before you make it past the aisle. Not far away, the First Baptist Church of St. Charles, where you can attend Sunday morning and evening, and then again on Wednesdays, they carry their own proud story too. Where I-dos have been promised, farewells have been spoken soft, and neighbors have broken bread together more times than anyone can count. Different buildings, same unshakable faith, each one a living reminder that here in St. Charles, worship ain't just a service. It's the heartbeat that's kept this little town alive. When the fire department closed its doors, most towns might have been left with a hole too big to fill. But in St. Charles, that gap was met with grit, heart, and the kind of selflessness you can't buy. The St. Charles Rescue Squad stayed and took over, not from money or mandates, but from neighbors stepping forward and saying, "We'll take care of our own." At just 14, Jeff Oakes rolled up his sleeves and got to work. Now at 60, he's still there, giving his time. Dedication like that isn't learned. It's born in the soul and tended over a lifetime. This little building here kept St. Charles connected to the rest of the world. The postmaster knew every name, every box number, and probably most of the letters before they were even opened. Folks would stop by to grab their mail, then stick around to chat on the steps. Outgoing letters carried love, news, and sometimes hard truths. Incoming ones brought joy, comfort, or the call of opportunity far from the mountains. And then there's this, the painted Welcome to St. Charles City of the Lord wall. Bright colors against brick, a handmade reminder of pride and belonging. A sign that tells you just how special and faithful this town was and is. Folks would stand right here, arms outstretched, taking pictures to send to family far away, proof that they'd made it home. And that's the thing about St. Charles. No matter how far you've wandered, there's always a welcome waiting for you. The coal industry that built St. Charles also shaped its fate. When the mines closed, the work and businesses faded, but the spirit of the people endured. Across from the community center stands a memorial to the miners who gave their all, some their health, others their lives. The bricks bear the names of fathers, grandfathers, uncles, and friends, alongside messages like, "In honor of all Lee County UMWA members, and God bless this town." Though the mines are silent, the memory of those who worked them lives on in the very breath and bones of St. Charles. We wanted to share Granny Hattie's story last because she represents what St. Charles is all about. Born in another time and living well past her 100th year, Granny Hattie saw the town change, watched generations grow, and still kept her quick wit and warm smile. Folks remember her front porch conversations, her home-cooked meals, and the way she made everyone, young and old, feel like family. Her granddaughter once said, "She was the heart of our family in the town. She loved everyone, and everyone loved her back." Granny Hattie lived through hardships most of us can only imagine, yet she carried herself with grace and humor. She was proof that strength and kindness can walk hand in hand. She made it to her 105th birthday. Imagine that. Everybody threw her the biggest birthday folks had seen in a while. And when she passed, it felt like the whole town paused to honor her, not just as a neighbor, but as a symbol of everything good in St. Charles. They knew that the good Lord above needed her up there in heaven to help spread some of that Appalachian wisdom around. And what a sight heaven was when Jesus met his faithful servant right there at the pearly gates. Folks, thanks so much for sticking around till the end. We hope we've shared the story of St. Charles in a way that honors the people who built it and the memories that still linger there. If you enjoyed this journey, we'd be mighty grateful if you'd like, share, and subscribe. It helps keep these mountain stories alive. Next stop, we'll be heading over to Virginia. God bless, and we'll see y'all next time.